Hi, everyone. My name is Varsha Sharma. I am the senior correspondent at NowThis. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We are so excited to be doing this event tonight with Climate Power and to be here and have this conversation with you all. What we're going to talk about tonight is the climate crisis and the many ways that climate change is affecting our communities right now. We will have a special focus on Michigan tonight thanks to a stellar panel of women leaders we have. But as we speak, wildfires continue in the West Coast. There's another hurricane barreling toward Louisiana and the Gulf Coast where my family lives. The crisis affects all of us and all of our loved ones. So we're here to talk about the ways that women leaders are demanding climate action in 2020. We'll be taking questions from the audience near the end of our live stream tonight. So if you have them, please drop them in the comment section and we'll try to get to as many as we can. But without further ado, let me introduce our participants. We have Senator Stephanie Chang, a Michigan State Senator. Lauren Ballore, the Michigan Political Director for America Votes, Teresa Landrum, Southwest Detroit community activist, and Jamira Burley, activist and social impact consultant. Ladies, thank you so much for joining us tonight for this discussion.
Thank you
for having me.
Thank you
for
having
me. So you're in one of the most important states, I think, in the ongoing election. A lot of eyes are on Michigan as a key battleground state. Trump won by just about 10,000 votes in 2016. At last night's vice presidential debate, we saw Senator Harris talk about believing in science and following the science. And then we saw Vice President Mike Pence not say whether he thinks climate change is an existential crisis. So what are your thoughts on Biden and Harris's climate plans, and what do you think we can expect in this area from a potential Biden-Harris administration? Who wants to go first?
I could start, and then I'm sure others will. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Lauren.
Oh, no, go ahead, Senator Chang. I'll chime in after.
Okay. I agree when folks have been saying that, the choice really couldn't be clearer on so many issues, but definitely on climate change. I mean, I think that the choice is very clear. I think that, Senator Harris and Vice President Biden have shown very clearly that they understand that climate change is a threat to our country and one of the biggest threats to our country. And, I also really appreciate the fact that Senator Harris has had, throughout her history, taken on big environmental justice fights, and she's not afraid to use the term environmental justice, whereas, unfortunately, the other side doesn't even know really what environmental justice means and what really is going on. But I think that, whether it's the wildfires that you mentioned or extreme flooding or, a lot of air pollution issues that we face in our district in Michigan, I just think that there are so many examples that show how needed action is now. And so I feel very much that November 3rd, that election and the voting that's happening right now, it's absolutely critical that everyone get out and vote and that we make the right choice.
Yeah, and just to chime in here, I think that the Biden-Harris clean energy and environmental justice plan, definitely is one that really harnesses in on building a modern, sustainable infrastructure and an equitable clean energy future. As mentioned in last night's debate through the potential Biden-Harris administration, there's an opportunity there to build a more resilient, sustainable economy, one that would, put us on the right path, especially with their plans to achieve net zero emissions economy-wide, no later than 2050. Both people on both sides of the aisle want to see this type of environmental change. Here in Michigan in 2016, during the lame duck session, a bipartisan energy package passed that aimed at making sure Michigan has all of the electricity generation it needs, as several coal-fired plants were slated to close in the coming years, while maintaining a small electric choice component in the state's highly regulated electricity marketplace. And this package aimed at increasing the use of a renewable energy and improving energy efficiency as well. So although that was a small victory, it was the effort of having environmental champions, and we can see that in potentially in the Biden-Harris administration.
Yeah, if I can just add to that, while I think that I was excited to finally hear a politician say that they believe in science and that we should trust the scientists, I also would be honest and say that I think we all know that it doesn't go far enough. It is probably farther than any presidential candidate in the history of the United States. But we also know that at this very moment, California is burning and parts of the country are really suffering. And I think it's really important that we recognize that while this is a great step in the right direction, the goal is to continue to push politicians even after they're elected to ensure that they continue to elevate these issues to the national stage and make comprehensive decisions that put us on a timeline with the rest of the world and not just of our own arbitrary thinking.
May I? I would like to add to that. With the Biden-Harris plan, I think that we're going to see aggressive, meaningful strategies to decrease carbon emissions. And that's what we're fighting against. 87% of the carbon emissions are contributing to the climate change and climate crises. And 87% of these carbon emissions are man-made. So I believe that Biden have a clear plan that is fluid. It can add and be added to. The risk that we take is that we have to understand that right now the climate is against reducing pollution, but that's what's needed. This is global. This is not just a national. And so I think that we can take the lead as Americans to be powerful enough and to be strategic enough to create a plan that is viable and that can be used as a model that can go around the world to other countries.
You know, I think as Jamira said, it's great that we're having this conversation, that they had it at the debate last night, but we obviously need more of it. We need to go deeper. We need to be bolder with policy ideas. I think you would all agree. But last week at the first presidential debate, it was actually the first time there was a climate question in 20 years, which seems unbelievable, but it's true. So I wanted to hear from you on what you think if there is another presidential debate or town hall, which we'll see depending on how President Trump feels, I suppose. What do you think needs to be better? What are the questions we should be asking of our highest elected officials? Jamira, why don't we start with you?
I mean, you know, one thing I appreciate about Michigan is that it is so resilient, but it made national headlines a few years ago because of a very real incident that's happening right now and is duplicated around the country, which is the fact that we're still lacking something as simple as basic clean water in what many people consider to be a developed country, right, in a global economy. And so I think what I would love to hear is not just our ideas of the emissions of how we're doing regarding these very big, grand concepts, but I would also love if politicians, and particularly the presidential nominees, to talk about really local solutions of how we're ensuring how folks in neighborhoods around the country have access to clean water, ensuring that we're addressing the health implications of the pollution that we've had in our country for so long. So for me, I would love for it to both be global, but also very localized solutions.
Senator Chang, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I would echo that. I think that, you know, clean and affordable, because we got to make sure that we're including that as well. Clean and affordable water has to be something that is, you know, on the debate stage as a really important topic that is something that affects so many people in Michigan, but really across the whole country. Of water affordability and clean drinking water is something that obviously we know in Michigan very well with the Flint water crisis, but especially in Detroit, where literally thousands of people over the course of a number of years now, over half a decade, have not had access to drinking water simply because they can't afford their water bills. We are the Great Lakes state. We are surrounded by fresh water. So the fact that we haven't yet figured out a way to ensure that every single person has access to clean drinking water that's affordable and is just really completely ridiculous, honestly. It's something that I've been working on since I started in the legislature, but we'll keep pushing until it gets done. But it's definitely a huge concern, and I think directly connected to COVID-19, thinking about the need for water to wash your hands, and also directly connected to all the other struggles that people are going through right now. So definitely needs to be talked about. And Senator Harris has championed legislation on this topic. So I hope there is an opportunity for her to be able to talk about it.
May I?
Yes,
I would like to see from the candidates a clear-cut conversation around global warming and how we can reduce the greenhouse gases. What's at stake here is that no one's paying attention to the deaths by air pollution. More than 7 million people die each year from air pollution. So we have to look at what's at stake. We're looking at loss of life and loss of land. And so I would like to see a clear-cut plan on the reduction of burning fossil fuels and the just transition to clean, green energy.
If I could just add to that, I think what Teresa, I'm just like jumping to well, I'm not really jumping, but I want to jump. But what I will say is that oftentimes I think communities and politicians look at climate change, particularly what you just talked about, as like these silent killers. But I think what COVID and many other vulnerabilities have shown is that these issues are actually very much broad daylight and impacting people every single day and are actually killing people at much larger numbers than a lot of the other issues that are making national news. So I would almost say we're lacking the political will, not the knowledge or the resources to do it.
I appreciate that. And you're going right into what I want to say. COVID brought to the forefront the vulnerabilities of communities on the front line. We have been crying about this every day. I've worked with Senator Chang. She knows the issue. She's been down in the community. And what the politicians have to understand, we are the stakeholders of America. We're the voters. We're the people that you should be taking care of. We want equity. We want justice. As mentioned, we want clean, affordable water. We want a quality of life equal to anybody else's. We want clean air, and carbon emissions and fossil fuel burning is a major issue that's impacting, as I said, not only America, but the globe.
Yeah, I want to chime in here a little bit, and it might shift gears, but it is definitely building off of some of the dialogue happening right now. As many know, climate change is not something new to our country. But what is new is that some of it to be determined is the response and action towards the climate crisis. And I kind of want to present a new phrase, and that is climate reform. We need to reform our mentality around environmental justice issues. For starters, it's difficult to assess the state of the climate crisis when it's not an issue that is always heralded to the forefront. That alone is problematic. The climate crisis cannot be deemed a crisis if it isn't first deemed a policy issue. And how can we expect the voting public to engage on this issue if we don't have the support of more and not just some policy and stakeholders that are responsible for lifting up the different entities of environmental injustice? And part of that solution to that reform would be to include environmental justice as a pipeline to addressing public health. You no longer see these as separate entities. We always think about what's at stake in our elections, and it's what's at stake is our long-term health and wellness. We can, go on about, how we're addressing these things, but part of the reasoning that the Flint water crisis was not deemed as a state of emergency, outside of the glaring racial disparities that tie into ignoring certain communities, is that it wasn't tied to a major health crisis, but it indeed was a major health crisis. A water crisis can be considered any contamination or regular activity of our waterways that impacts communities through our health and safety. And the Flint water crisis, in addition to the frequent flooding nationwide, but more specifically in mid-Michigan, the Line 5 crisis with our Straits of Mackinac being at risk with oil contamination, highlight different examples of how our waterways impact our health. And so, when we define these things more clearly, the voting public as well as policymakers are able to tie in these solutions. And with water, that just happens to be particularly infrastructure as well. So it has a trickle-down effect that overall affects environmental justice.
Speaking of policies at the local and state level, Senator, you received 100%, I think, from the Michigan League of Conservation Voters for some of your positive action that's already been mentioned here. Do you have any other initiatives in the pipeline to tackle next to help combat this crisis? Are you working with others in the state legislature? What are you hearing from others? I'm curious about how that's going.
Yeah, thanks for that question. I came into the legislature without any type of like environmental science degree or anything like that, but it quickly became one of my top priorities. Environmental justice is something that I've been working on pretty much, like I feel like just every day, all the time, because it's something that our residents, deserve strong solutions and getting these things done. Unfortunately, it's really an uphill battle right now, given the makeup of our state legislature. But we have residents who have been fighting for decades. And Teresa Landrum, it's really always an honor to be in an event together with you, because she is one of those who has just been really fighting on these issues for a long time. So as far as solutions, yes, we've definitely been working on a number of things. One of the things that keeps coming up over and over again, and is something where when I first came into office and started going to all of these hearings about environmental violations over and over and over again for different companies, it kept coming up that the money that the companies pay for these violations when they get to a consent order doesn't actually come back to the communities that is being impacted. It goes into this general fund, which, is, I'm sure, going to worthy causes, of course, but what I would like to see, and what I've introduced this legislation a few times now, is to actually make sure that the money comes back directly to the community that's impacted, and specifically environmental justice communities, in the form of air monitoring, health impact assessments, vegetative buffers, school air filtration systems. So there's lots of things that can be done. But I also think ultimately, we probably need to actually completely overhaul the way that we do air quality permitting in the state of Michigan, in terms of looking at just stricter standards and things like that. But we also have a lot that we need to do in terms of looking at cumulative impact across multiple sources and multiple types of pollutants. When we have in my district, in and outside of my district, a couple steel plants. Well, one, now actually they've been shutting down. But when I first started, 2 steel plants, an oil refinery, international truck traffic, a coal-fired power plant. Just the list goes on. I probably missed, half a dozen other major sources. The fact that we haven't been able to actually look at, well, how do all of these different pollutants from all of these sources actually work together and impact someone's health, is something that we really need to do. And so these are things that residents have been talking about for years. And now us policymakers, we're, trying to continue to push this idea, but we've got a long way to go. So we need to actually ensure that we get more like-minded legislators into the Michigan legislature so that we can actually begin to pass some of these policies.
May I? Senator Chang just mentioned the uphill battle. The uphill battle that we face is the culture that the regulatory agencies have. That culture has to be changed. We have to have diversity. We have to have environmental justice training for the regulatory agency. Right now, the uphill battle is that we have to look at all the rollbacks that the present administration is doing to eliminate the protections for water, land, and clean air. So it's going to take years to reverse the damage that has been done. So the work comes in getting the like-minded people in office that has the humanity side of it to understand that these policies are detrimental to environmental justice communities. It's detrimental to the quality of our water and our land. And as mentioned, a affordable water payment plan for people that are low income. That's what's needed. We need to change the culture of how we look at citizens and how we look at the voters and how we look at the people of Michigan. And that needs to change.
Jameer, I feel like you study and understand the actual community impact here. I'd love to hear what you think about some of the policies and initiatives that they just mentioned.
I mean, why are we not doing it? That's why earlier I mentioned, we have some of the smartest people, the most dedicated people in this country who are committed to climate change, not committed to climate change, I should say, who are committed to the reversal of climate change in this country, and to actually put forth realistic solutions for how we can move this country forward and ensure that we're being a team player with the rest of the world as we continue to try to reverse much of the damage that's already been done. That being said, I think what we're really faced with is the lack of political will by politicians to oftentimes see how this is truly impacting particularly communities of color, and how it continues to delay and prevent them from living their true self. Oftentimes, what we see with white and both rich Americans is that they can get up and move if they don't like the change in scenery, the change of in the environment that's happening in their communities. And so, what I think really needs to happen is for us to collectively come together and think about who isn't at the table. So how do we bring community members, directly impacted people, business leaders, government officials together to really think about what are the solutions for change, and how do we leave a world for our young people that they can actually prosper, and not one in which they're trying to live with the consequences of past generations' pollutions to this earth.
Speaking of political will and just elected officials, Lauren, how do you think we should be holding elected officials accountable once they are at the table or they do get into office, and we want to see some of these things actually enacted?
So, I think this kind of plays a role into how we're looking at having, elected officials be engaged up and down the ballot. And for starters, I'm just kind of going to cut to the meat of the matter and be frank. The environmental realm of politics and policy at its core was never meant to be inclusive. For starters, it actually, because it's one of our more bipartisan issue areas where legislators are more likely to work across the aisle, representation matters. And we have to start by debunking the myth of the environmental organizer, the climate change champion. When I first began working specifically in the environmental policy sphere, there were so many people, mainly people of color, that were unaware of the advocacy organizations that combat the climate crisis and work to protect the environment. And I think we need to start with having different representation and candidates up and down the ballot to even address these issues. And not just for the sake of an endorsement to their campaign, but truly working with Black, AAPI, Latinx, women, LGBTQ candidates to engage them and maybe even educate them on these issues. As Senator Tang mentioned, she did not have an environmental degree or environmental science degree, but I know for a fact she is someone that truly cares, because I was one of the people when I worked at an organization that made sure we honored her for her work. They are the connections to the communities and identities that they represent, especially that of women. Understanding the role of gender in environmental history helps to explain why women are disproportionately drawn to environmental justice activism. The modern environmental justice movement brought in the primarily white middle-class woman, mostly tied to water areas or states. But what about the non-white woman? What about the metropolitan woman? Historically, because of gender inequalities, climate disruption hits women first and far worse. And there have been studies that show the women in low-income families have a hard time recovering from extreme weather events or adapting to climate disruption. So it's important to have candidates who are versed on these issues or willing to be versed on these issues, and those who are working with environmental organizations or environmental organizers like that of Teresa to address it.
If I can add, it might also be worth it to educate folks who are working at the intersection of other issues, because I think oftentimes one of the reasons why climate change doesn't make it to the national stage is because so often people can say, well, that's an issue we can continue to push the bucket, right? Push down the line and hope that eventually it'll solve itself. But if we really start talking to people about the implications of how violence is also an indicator of climate change, or how so many other issues play a key role, we could probably broaden our coalition and enable for more voices to be included in the conversation.
May I?
If I can.
Lauren brought up a very important point, and that is the people that are being impacted the most are often left out of the conversation. And Senator Chang knows when she first became state representative that our organization of 22 block clubs, that's what we talked about, us not having a voice. us not having the opportunity to help make decisions that were being made about us. So we are the experts. We live it every day. There has to be inclusion. And not only should we listen to the scientists, but we should listen to the actual people that are being impacted. No one was listening to the mom that was telling the people that something was wrong because her child had drank the Flint water, and that the child was having some health issues. Nobody listened to the actual people that were impacted. So we have to open that door, and we have to allow equity. If you have legislatures, if you have academia, if you have business, you should have community representation at that table.
I completely agree. And actually, I was going to go back to exactly, when you talk about, residents holding elected officials accountable, Teresa Landrum's actually a really great example of that, because in my former House district, Teresa and I have had many conversations, and I do think that you've been a huge positive influence, honestly, on the way that I do my work as a legislator now, because a number of the policies that I've introduced have come directly from residents or have, been shaped by or get feedback from people like you. But I think, sometimes going in, a lawmaker kind of needs the nudging and needs sometimes a little bit of tough love, I think, and saying, here is really what's going on and here is what's needed. And so, especially, when I talk about, the issue of bringing money back into the community from corporate polluters, that's not something that I automatically knew about, right? It was something that I had heard from the community over and over and over again. And really that bill actually, as introduced, it really drew from many of the things that residents had been saying. So I completely agree that, residents who are most impacted need to be a part of part of the solution. And I think we also need to, I agree on the point of interweaving different issues, because someone might be running for office because they want to make an impact on economic issues. Well, then making the connection between economic issues and climate change, or someone might be really into, healthcare access. Well, making the connection about environmental justice and climate change and asthma and, high rates of asthma hospitalization for children, for example, in the city of Detroit. And so finding those connections, especially right now during COVID, when some of those connections could not be clearer, when you've got people who already can't breathe because they've got asthma because of where they live and the air pollution. And then on top of that, in a community that has been impacted so hard by COVID-19, people literally struggling to breathe. It just, I think that this whole terrible year of 2020 has shown, I hope, to many more people why all of these issues are connected, but we have to keep talking about it, because I feel that, just even March seems like so many years ago. This pandemic is just, it's rocked us all. But we have to keep these issues on the forefront.
Senator, I'm totally with you on how 2020 has just been grueling and exhausting. But speaking about the intersection of these issues, I think it was really remarkable this summer to see the Black Lives Matter protests against systemic racism in all corners of the country, even very small towns where, don't normally see this kind of activism. I think that was amazing. So Teresa, as somebody who's deeply rooted in the environmental justice community, I would love to hear if you have anything to add to what Lauren was saying about gender bias in this area as well. Any obstacles that you have faced or seen as a result of that, and what you would say to other younger women who are getting in the fight?
Yes, I would have to agree with Lauren. It's gender-based politics. We have to look at who's been in charge. It has been always, in my experience, a room full of conservative white men that have no idea what as an African-American woman experiences when she has a child that has an asthma attack. So we have to, as I mentioned about the regulatory agency of EGLE, the culture, the training, and systemic racism goes all the way back to the slave days when it was all about control. And we have to look at this. It's about follow the money. If you're poor, if you're African American, and if you're a woman, your life is valued it's not valued at all, in my opinion. And so it is a gender. Look at the administration now. Look at it. Mostly men, mostly white men that have no idea what it's like to wake up not being able to breathe, or have to rush your child to the hospital because they're having an asthma attack. So we have to change that dynamic. We have to look at what is this. America is a melting pot of diversity. Diversity and inclusion must be a part of the package in order for us to move forward, in order for that needle to be moved.
I think we do have a major milestone, right, with the addition of Senator Harris to the Democratic ticket. She is the first Black woman to be a vice president nominee on a major party ticket, the first Asian American, South Asian American, Indian American, whatever level you want to put at it. She's the first in this role as well. And Senator, I believe you were the first Asian American woman to be elected to the state legislature. So what was that like for you? Some of your colleagues are these conservative white men that Teresa is talking about as well. What specific challenges do you see in your day job?
Sure. Well, I'm in a bit of an anomaly, right? Because I'm the only Asian American in the Senate. And yeah, I was the first Asian American woman in the legislature in Michigan. Luckily now we have two, so that's exciting. And hopefully growing. But it's an interesting dynamic. Partially because in my district, especially in my old House district, it was predominantly African American. Now in my Senate district, it's pretty much Black and white, with Detroit and downriver. And there aren't really that many Asian Americans. But I think, and then in the legislature, I think I serve a role of obviously representing my residents in my district as best I can in all of the issues going on, but also an additional level of responsibility that I take with great pride to ensure that I'm also lifting up Asian American issues, which are connected. Everyone's connected, and so it's been a bit of a challenge. But I think regardless of what someone's background is, I think that climate change is something that all of our communities care about, and definitely in the Asian American community as well. As far as challenges working with my colleagues across the aisle, it's actually been interesting because I do think that a number of them really are there because they want to make a difference. They just represent different districts with people who have very different realities sometimes. I think we do all have we all as Michiganders have a shared value set, I think, deep down. But it shows up in different ways and people live in different realities. COVID-19 has shown that because, I just think back to and environmental issues for sure have also, I think, shown the differences between different parts of our state. Because some people don't, like when I talk about environmental justice, a lot of times people, I think in the beginning, now they're probably used to me talking about it all the time, but I'm not sure that they knew really what I was talking about because they don't have like the concentration of all this air pollution in their districts because they represent districts where there aren't, as many people of color and as many like concentrated urban, areas of poverty. So, and so I recognize and I've learned, over and over again that people's districts are different. People have different constituencies that they represent. And so I think part of the challenge is finding the connections because, for example, with water affordability and water access may show up in a completely different way in rural Michigan compared to Detroit. So I have to learn about what's going on in rural Michigan to be able to make that connection. And I didn't know this, but there are certain areas that are not at all connected to municipal water systems, and they have to drive, and fill up with water if they don't have a well, to be able to get access to water. So finding the different angles on an issue, I think, has been something that I've tried to do, and that we have to continue to do, both as lawmakers, but just as people. I think recognizing that across our state, people just have completely different realities in so many ways. So we have to find the common ground based on we need air, we need water, we need access to water. Finding those things.
Right. Because climate change impacts us all. And the legacy we're leaving our children, that life doesn't matter. If we don't change things around by, I say, 2030, the climate will heat up so hot that it's going to increase the flooding, increase the tornadoes, increase the hurricanes. It's going to increase the droughts. It's going to increase the fires. And if we don't change that now, we won't have anything left to look forward to. Our children won't have anything left to look forward to. And then it was mentioned about the changing of the mindset. People are not identifying that what impacts me. I've grown up in polluted air all my life. I don't know anything other than that. But what impacts me today is going to impact you tomorrow. So it's not just happening in EJ communities of color or Black and brown communities. It is spreading. Pollution and the environmental crisis is spreading to other areas. So we have to realize we're all in this together. So we should have our white allies working with the Black and brown allies to find solutions to this climate crisis, find solutions to clean water, and find solutions to make a just transition to clean energy, such as hydropower, wind turbine, electricity. How can we make that change and make it equitable for everybody? That's the challenge. And make sure that everybody can identify that it's just not impacting the Black and brown people. It's going to impact all people.
Lauren, our political director, I want to hear what you think about that.
So I absolutely agree. In my head, I'm giving 3 snaps to Teresa and what she's mentioning. And even, the point that was made about intersectionality. And I want to take it back to a little bit to what dig on what I mentioned earlier about the historical data on gender bias and ways that we can create solutions for that. One of the main ways that we can reduce the impact of climate disruption on women or certain marginalized communities is by eliminating gender inequality and racial inequality altogether. And I want to highlight one solution that was made to do that. Previously, Sierra Club worked with the UN Foundation's Universal Access Project and Resource Media to launch Women at the Center, which was to highlight the links between gender equality and climate resilience. And this initiative addressed access to education, voluntary family planning, and clean energy, women and girls, and showing that when they have that, women and girls are better prepared to deal with the effects of climate disruption. And it's proven that with this support, women are also better able to cope with extreme weather events, feed their families, and, overall live the lives that they're choosing. And, I think that we really have to applaud how women deal with crisis. There's a stereotype that we can't handle that type of pressure. And I think that we've proven through this pandemic in several cities and states that we are able to do just that. And so, I think also to Jameera's point, we're able to naturally tie in these issues. First and foremost, as women, especially with all of us on this panel being women of color, including Versha yourself, we are able to deal with multifaceted identities. And dealing with multifaceted identities gives us the strength and ability to deal with multifaceted issues. And so we naturally can bring those issues together. As Jameera mentioned, we can tie in race and public health. we can tie in climate crisis and asthma, because you know what? We are multifaceted in our own identity. So we know what it takes to do that. We naturally look at those demographics, which is why you have to have diversity at the forefront in leadership, whether it's the organizer, community activist, whether it's the consultant, whether it's the political director, because I am in the minority many times on that side of things, or whether it's the elected official. I think all of our voices really should be heralded to the forefront, because we've shown time and time again that we know how to address issues in a different way, because our mindsets are already set up for that type of intellectual capacity. So I just think that, you know, many of the points mentioned actually just tie into what our actual abilities are as women and as women of color.
So we
Lauren,
need
if you
more
go ahead.
to run for office.
I was just going to say, Lauren, if you ever decide to run for office, I'm going to tell my friends in Michigan to vote for you. I feel like that was just a great spiel you just
Feel
gave.
free to announce your candidacy right now.
Oh my gosh, I get asked that all the time. It's so crazy.
I mean, I think that means something that you're asked that.
Yeah. But seriously, I think that we do need more women of color to run for office. Luckily, in Michigan, our numbers in the Michigan legislature have gone up significantly since I first started. It looks very different than it did 6 years ago, which is exciting. But we need to do better. But I think that having so many women of color in the legislature, and hopefully more down the line, it makes a big difference, because we're me and my colleagues, we're bringing up issues as moms of color, as people who represent district. Like, we just look at things from a different way. And so, and we're bringing up things, like, I just look at some of the bills that some of my colleagues have put forth and have managed to get through, and myself too. Like, if we weren't there, like, I actually don't know who would be working on these things. And so I think it's so important, not just for the numbers of women of color and our representation, but for the policies that will impact all of our communities. Every chance I get, I always try to encourage more women of color to run for office, because I think it makes a huge difference.
Yeah, I would like to add to that. During the Flint, in light of the Flint crisis, I had the opportunity to work on the 217-218 Environmental Justice Working Group convened under Governor Snyder. In the room, it was usually business, academia, regulatory agencies, and EJ orgs. There had never been a community representative on any of the environmental justice working groups that had been convening since 1994. And to point out that not one EJ plan had been created and implemented at the time. So when I was appointed to it, I didn't want to do it. And like Stephanie said, you have to jump in, you have to go for it. I refused to do it because I didn't want to be connected to anything Snyder. But Rhonda Anderson of the Sierra Club said, go ahead and do it, because it's monumental, because this will be the first time that there will be a community voice, and a community voice, a woman of color coming from an impacted community, to be on this working group. So I joined the working group, and out of that working group came 33 recommendations that dealt just with environmental justice, definition of what is an environmentally impacted community, and regulations, things that would help strengthen regulations that would be implemented, that would benefit communities that are impacted by environmental justice, and which our present Governor Whitmer is implementing some of them. One of them, we asked for a ombudsman of sort, and we now have Regina Strong, who is the public advocate. We now have an EO by Whitmer that's going to deal with climate. So it's important to have the right people in the room. And there's a lot of fear, as people said about, just mentioned about going into office. There's a lot of fear with that, because Stephanie knows it's the rollbacks that she sees when she sponsors the bill and the uphill fight that she has to try to get a bill passed, is because the mindset has not changed about women and diversity, and then people coming from minority communities.
Now, Jamira, you've been recognized by the Obama White House as a champion for change. So you've been speaking about this at the national level as well. So how are you seeing how messaging has changed, or what's your advice for what the messaging should be right now?
I definitely think the messaging is so much more inclusive. And I also think that so many more different people from a range of different backgrounds are talking about climate change in a really honest and authentic way, because it's hard to miss when you see the fires happening in California. And so I think at the national level, we're finally getting a sense of what communities have been saying and doing for the last 50 to 100 years in this country. And so I'm excited about the movement of what this looks like going forward, and also excited that the fact that so many more directly impacted people like Teresa are able to be at the table and help to really structure solutions for change that are representative of the community needs. We need more people like that at the national level.
Now, Teresa, you also mentioned the governor, and we do have some audience questions. We'll get to them in just a second. Before we do that, I wanted to just see how you all felt about the news today that your own governor was the target of a plot to be kidnapped by these anti-government men with ties to militias, or they're members of militias. I mean, I feel like that speaks to so much the threats against women in this line of work. Trump emboldened a lot of those people, right? He was tweeting that people should liberate Michigan over COVID-19 restrictions. So yeah, just honestly, what was your reaction when you saw that news today? Senator, maybe you first. Go ahead, Teresa.
Yeah. Well, my reaction was, I had already previously thought that when she was elected, but I had it at the back of my mind. And it's about fear and control. And when the news broke, I wasn't shocked. I was like to myself, this is bringing out what the mindset of white men think about a woman in power. Simple. So that's all I have to say. It wasn't a surprise to me. To me, it was expected. I'm shocked that it took so long for it to be revealed. But anytime you have a woman challenging the status quo, it's going to be a threat against her, whether it be withholding money, or whether it be a fear tactic of deadlocking or a bill that she wants to have passed. So it wasn't a shock to me. It was expected.
For me, I mean, I was shocked. I mean, I knew there's been a lot of hatred just in our whole country, but also specifically in Michigan. I think back to, April 30th, when there were armed protesters in our Capitol, and it's I was there. And the most frightening part, honestly, that I mean, thank goodness our governor and her family are safe. And thank goodness for Attorney General Dana Nessel, the FBI, state police, I'm forgetting other U.S. attorneys general on both sides of the state, because this is a huge effort. But honestly, the most frightening part for me is to think that the plotting started back in the spring, and that we've seen now from pictures that some of the people who were arrested are people who were at that armed protest, and that were inside our Capitol. So it's honestly, it's something that has me and my colleagues pretty scared. Thankfully, we've got really great sergeants who keep us safe, and state police has a presence there, but guns are allowed at the state Capitol right now. There's no restriction. And we have, a lot of folks who are being encouraged by our president to just with this hatred. And it's very disturbing. It's frightening. I'm grateful for all of the great work that folks did leading up to today. But honestly, it's pretty disturbing.
Yeah, I'm going to chime in here.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm going to just say I was disgusted. When this is something that you go to school for, you have a master's in, like you like this is not just about partisanship. This is our career. It's something we're also passionate about, and we're advocates, but this is our career. And it's been a mockery since 2016. And I'm tired of it, quite frankly, because this isn't even about politics. This is about narcissism and control. And, it's more of a cult-like, Jim Jones-like, I'm going to follow you to my own death mentality. And I think that even when we're having news reporting, or when we are, relying on individuals in positions that can put this out on their own platforms, we need people to use the right wording. It's a terrorist attack. These are terrorists. Yes. This is treason.
Yes.
Like, this is actually un-American. Start using the right words. Because seriously, we don't have time to play games anymore. Like cut the professionalism. We don't have time to play games. This is more of I'm sorry. I just was going to say, I'm all about us having different views. I'm not telling someone to have the exact same viewpoint as me. I understand partisanship. I understand different sides of the aisle. What I'm not going to accept, and what I'm not going to understand and take, is nonsense that has to do with cult-like behavior. Call it a cult. Call it what it is.
Terrorism.
No, it definitely is a cult in every aspect. And I think one of the things that's really scary about this moment, particularly when you think about climate change, is that, this is not numbers that random people are making up. This is exactly what the science says. And I would think that there used to be a time where people believed in science, but what we've seen now from this administration, particularly when you look at the issues related to climate change, is that he likes the ability to rile people up and to continue to create division by making them believe that they don't have to believe what very intelligent people have said in this country. And also, I think, there's only one thing I agree with Vice President Pence that he said last night, is that you can have different opinions, but you can't dispute the facts. And the facts are very clear that if we don't do something, we're literally not going to have an earth left to leave to future generations. California is burning. That is not a new concept. We still don't have clean water in this country. That is not a new concept. People are still dying from very preventable problems in this country. That is not a new concept. So I think we have to get back to a place where people at the very least are willing to believe fact, and then we can dispute what are the solutions and how to get us back to where we need to be.
Exactly. Climate change is accelerating. It's not stopping. And we have to take measures now to see what we can do. We can't repair, we can't go back, but we can move forward. And being a woman of color, being in my 60s, I'm not going to say I'm used to threats or things like that, but Black people know that once you get in power or you threaten someone else's, what they feel is their power, the threats are going to come. But this concerted effort against our governor should be addressed as mentioned. This is a terrorist attack, and the charges should reflect that. They should use them as examples to show that when you make a concerted plot against an elected official, that the hard hand of the law comes down on you. I mean, the severe consequences should come out of this. This doesn't make any sense, and it should not be tolerated. Every white man in America should stand up and say, this is not right. I don't care what side of the fence that they're on. And no, America, this is not what America's about. I know we have problems with the political parties, but to actually do a concerted plot and to plan and to test it out, this lets us know through, even with the ladies in Congress, the threats were there. And this one here just happened to be discovered. There's probably many more out there. And I hope that this is a wake-up call for them to understand that we do have an FBI, we do have law enforcement, we do have people that have the well-being of our elected officials at the forefront of their mind, and they're going to do everything to protect them. This just doesn't make any sense, and it shouldn't be allowed.
I was glad to see that AG Nessel's press release immediately said that at least 7 of the men, I think, were being charged under state's anti-terrorism law. So straight from there, like the beginning of the press release, she was putting that language out there, which was great. And Teresa, to your point, which I completely agree with, about how white men and women need to stand up on so many of these issues that you're talking about, but especially something like a threat to the governor's life or family that got this far in terms of actual planning. I was glad to see that Joe Biden said he called the governor today and spoke to her. We could talk about this, but we do need to get to an audience question as we wrap this up. But after Trump called Kamala Harris a monster on Fox News this morning, Biden said, he's got a problem with strong women. Like that's clear. That's been clear. But let's go to our audience question. We have one from Jasmine Hall, I believe.
The science is clear, and how we vote in November will express whether we believe that environmental justice and climate change should remain priorities for our state and our country. I'm Jasmine Hall. I'm from Flint, Michigan, and my question is, what are the green jobs that we can expect in Michigan's future, and how do we prepare for those jobs today? Thank you.
Anyone want to take that one on? Go ahead, Lauren.
Yeah, I can take it on because it actually ties back into the Biden-Harris plan that was mentioned about clean energy and environmental justice. Some of the things that were outlined included the auto industry, also included transit, also included opportunities for innovation and building on more union jobs. And so that's really a good potential opportunity for the state of Michigan to actually acknowledge those specific avenues because, we need more advanced transit systems. We need to build more on the auto industry. And I think Biden definitely has that experience, as we know, with the bailout. And we need more diversity and more intentionality around diversity when it comes to union and skilled trade jobs that actually add into the environmental and clean energy investment process. So these are just some things that I think ties back in this potential plan that we can hopefully hold this potential new administration accountable for if successful in November.
I wish we could keep discussing with all of you. I could do this all night, honestly, but I do want to get in at least one more audience question. I think we have one from a woman named Emily Korn.
My name is Emily Korn, and I am from Midland, Michigan. In May of this year, 2 dams failed, resulting in the destruction of thousands of people's homes and businesses across the Great Lakes Bay region, my grandmother's home included. Climate change creates more extreme weather circumstances that dams across the state and nation are unprepared to withstand. How can we ensure that the devastation experienced here in Midland is prevented for communities in the future?
I think it's a really important question, and the dam failure in Midland was a terrible tragedy and something that probably could have been prevented. When you look at the history of the owner of that site and just the failures to really hold that company accountable, it's clearly something that we can do better at. And it also reminds me of other infrastructure issues that we can actually solve and address. Again, if there's the political will and if there's the resources, financial resources to be able to do it, because we know where a lot of the problem sites are. We've got a lot of infrastructure that needs to get fixed, and then flooding. I think when you talk about, climate change and the flooding that's happening around our whole country, but even in my own district, on the east side of Detroit in Jefferson Chalmers, with flooding that has happened there, especially last spring, and then also further downriver, flooding is definitely a continuing issue. It's going to continue to become a bigger problem. So we absolutely need to do better.
Yeah, I really think that we should take a look at the regulatory agency and the people that govern, owners having the power not to repair seawalls and put up bridge protectors. and holding them accountable, that is going to, I really think that if the people of Midland got together collectively and went to their congressperson, their senator, their state rep, their local government, and asked them to be heard, that they could help change the regulations, the laws that would regulate somebody not not adhering to the violations or the orders that were given to them. They have to be held more accountable. I don't think that there is a recourse if we don't hold the legislative body and our regulatory agency accountable. Right now, I understand that the powers of EGLE are limited. I don't know how true that is, but this is going to be hard to say for me, giving them more power to regulate better and giving them the money so they can send out the inspectors to inspect these seawalls and inspect these flood zones and make sure that the proper repairs are done. So more inspections and in that respect, and more money to go towards the inspections of the areas that could be breached. And as Senator Chang said, my community in parts of her district, she used to be my state rep, but no longer. She's more downriver. We're used to the flooding. We're used to it. It happens all the time. And in many areas, we can't even purchase flood insurance. So over and over and over, we have to depend on the government coming in and declaring an emergency in order for them to get some kind of relief, through FEMA. So we have to, I think this time we have to depend on our regulatory agency and give them the strength with money and funding to put more inspectors out there, inspect the vulnerable areas where flooding may happen due to the increase in the water that's going into the lakes and then the water rising, breaching the seawalls.
And we've got time. Yes, exactly. I feel like we've all wanted to do that throughout tonight. Jamira, we've got time for just closing thoughts from everybody here. So I'd love to hear, is there one main takeaway or message that you want people to remember during these elections? Or, what's giving you hope? What do you want to look forward to?
I think the two things that gives me hope are young people and everyday citizens who are championing these issues every single day, oftentimes at the detriment of their own bodies and their own health. And so I think which should be a resounding message coming from this panel is that we have no time to wait, that if we really want to cultivate and create the world for future generations, and even for ourselves, we have to fight now. We have to ensure that climate change is on the agenda at every single level of government. And we also have to ensure that we're creating the intersectionality of other issues so people can continue to talk about them and speak out.
Lauren, how about you? Senator, I love, seeing the working mom life. It's real.
Yeah, I think a closing thought I want to leave people with is that it's easy to dismiss communities, especially communities of color, when you don't see their value. And when people become immune to secondary marginalization, you become immune to ignoring injustice, and that includes environmental injustice. We have seen how the denial of science has led to the denial of people's livelihood, and we need a plan that can work across states and, be potentially good for Michigan, California, Arizona, New Mexico. And, overall, it's 2020, and we should not still have dilapidated school buildings or homes or pipelines. So that's something I would definitely want to leave people with, that, we have to stop marginalizing communities and choosing to ignore the imbalance and inequity as we look at different issues. And that is definitely important when it comes to climate change and environmental injustice.
All right, Senator, any final thoughts?
Sure, just that November 3rd, and please vote, and please get your ballots in as soon as you get them. You can find your drop boxes. You can go to michigan.gov/vote to find out where you're registered and where your nearest drop boxes are and all of that. Please, 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 especially with all the delays in the mail and everything else, we just want to make sure everyone is able to make their vote count. And lastly, in terms of what gives me hope, my two daughters, and they drive my decisions and everything that I do, both at home and at work at the Capitol. So it's their future we're fighting for.
Teresa, how about you?
What gives me hope and energizes me is the conversation that we're having now about inclusion of women in the decision making, the inclusion of people of color, the inclusion of marginalized communities. And also what energizes me are the demonstrations. Young people are now becoming politically energized to know that their vote has power and they have a choice. And collectively, their voice can be heard. So please get out and vote, vote, vote.
Thank you all so much for taking the time to do this tonight. Thank you to everybody who's been watching and commenting. We hope to do more events like this. Hopefully, in a month or maybe 6 weeks, we'll be able to talk about steps we can take in a new administration. We'll see how that goes. Senator and Teresa, I've loved seeing your dynamic and your history of working together. That's been great. Lauren and Jamira, thank you both so much for your insight. Thank you all.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you.
You too. Thanks.